I always believed my wife, Tessa, was the most caring and responsible person I knew. She devoted herself to our daughter, Haley, from the moment she was born, reading parenting books and hovering over every tiny detail of her life. When Tessa mentioned she wanted a hobby to feel more fulfilled, I felt relieved for her. She deserved a break from the daily routines of cooking, cleaning, and mothering. At first, I supported any idea she had: pottery, painting, volunteering at an animal shelter, anything that might reignite her spark. But she kept changing her mind, never settling on one activity. Then she claimed she found something that made her truly happy, some creative pursuit she refused to name. She started coming home later than usual, always with a new explanation. It was harmless, I told myself. She was probably enjoying an art class or a photography workshop. Slowly, however, Tessa began missing Haley's events, even the ones she used to plan months in advance, like her choir recitals and spelling bees. Each time, Tessa apologized and promised she wouldn't miss the next one, but somehow, life kept getting in the way, and I felt a knot of anxiety forming inside. Tessa's excuses began to feel like flimsy bandages slapped over a growing wound. On Tuesday evenings, she claimed she was attending a knit and crochet circle with a group of neighborhood women, yet she never brought home a single scarf or sweater. When Haley had a small dance recital, Tessa texted me 15 minutes before showtime, saying she was stuck in traffic and might miss it. She arrived right at the end, wearing unfamiliar perfume. That scent lingered in our living room, unsettling me more than I wanted to admit. I tried asking about her new hobby, but her answers were always vague or contradictory. Sometimes she mentioned learning a foreign language. Other times she spoke about volunteering at an art gallery. Oddly, she never showed any evidence. No pamphlets, no new vocabulary, no glimpses of artwork. Haley asked me one night, "Why doesn't Mom come to my stuff anymore?" I had no real answer, a flimsy reassurance that she was busy with something important. I told myself it was a phase, that Tessa would settle down and remember what mattered most: her family. But with every broken promise, I felt my patience fraying, unsure how long I could pretend everything was fine. As more weeks passed, Tessa's odd behavior grew impossible to ignore. She had always been open with her phone, leaving it on the counter for anyone to see, but now she clutched it like a secret diary. I noticed her texting well past midnight, the screen's glow illuminating her tense face. If I asked who it was, she'd say it was just a friend from her new class, someone named Lily. I felt a pang of unease each time I heard that name. At first, I was grateful Tessa had found a female companion. Maybe that connection would fill the gap she seemed to feel. But her late arrivals and missed family dinners only grew more frequent, and Lily's name appeared more often in casual conversation. Whenever I pressed for details, where had they met? What did Lily do for a living? Tessa's answers were frustratingly thin. She'd wave me off or change the subject. I tried to keep my suspicions in check, reminding myself that Tessa had never given me a reason to doubt her before. Yet, the gap between us widened with every unanswered question, and Haley's disappointment became an ever-present ache that I couldn't fix with reassuring words. One evening, Haley was practicing for her upcoming spelling bee. She carefully recited words at the kitchen table, scanning my face for encouragement. Tessa was supposed to be there too, but she texted me again saying, "Lily needs my help, running late." Her absence cast a heavy shadow over our home. Haley pretended not to mind, but her eyes told a different story. I sat by her side, reading the next word on the list, unable to ignore the weight of Tessa's empty chair. Later that night, Tessa slipped in quietly, avoiding eye contact as she tossed her purse on the sofa. I asked if everything was okay. She claimed Lily had personal issues, that she was just offering emotional support. Her explanation should have eased my concern, yet something about her hollow expression alarmed me more. We barely spoke after that. Tessa went straight to bed, and I listened to the soft hum of the air conditioner, wondering when the laughter we once shared had become so strained. Even in our silent bedroom, I felt her drifting away, like a shadow you catch out of the corner of your eye but can never fully see. Despite my reservations, I wanted to trust Tessa. We'd built a life together: weekend brunches, family game nights, beach vacations. She had always been the rock that held our small world steady. Now that stability teetered under invisible pressure. Worried, I confided in my brother, who advised me to have a straightforward conversation, to lay everything out in the open. That weekend, when Haley was at a friend's house, I prepared to speak with Tessa. My heart pounded as I approached her. She was scrolling through her phone, face drawn. I told her I missed her, that her absences were hurting Haley. She nodded, but said very little. Then she admitted she felt trapped in her routine, that her life had become so predictable she could barely breathe. I asked where Lily fit into all this. Tessa's eyes flickered with guilt, but she insisted Lily was just a friend, someone who understood her need for excitement. I wanted to believe her. I wrapped my arms around her and promised we could find new ways to explore life together. For a moment, Tessa softened in my embrace, but I sensed she was keeping a part of herself locked behind a door I couldn't open. A few days later, I noticed an odd charge on our credit card statement. A luxurious restaurant downtown, the kind of place Tessa and I had never visited. When I questioned her, she said Lily had taken her there as a treat. The story felt forced, but I didn't press. Then came a missing ring from her jewelry box, one Tessa cherished, yet claimed she misplaced. I tried convincing myself these were all coincidences, that Tessa was just careless with her belongings. However, I couldn't quell the knot in my stomach whenever her phone buzzed late at night, or when she came home with a hurried explanation about some new workshop. Haley, for her part, kept drawing pictures of our family with Tessa standing far away, holding hands with a faceless figure. I thought it was childish imagination, but perhaps children sense truths long before adults can admit them. By then, Tessa had missed Haley's last 3 school events. Each time, I watched Haley scan the audience for her mother, only to sigh in disappointment. My wife would arrive afterward, full of apologies that rang hollow, and I found myself biting my tongue to keep from lashing out in front of Haley. One afternoon, I was searching for a folder in Tessa's desk when I discovered a small notebook tucked beneath a pile of bills. Inside were scribbled phone numbers, dates, and times, none of which I recognized. One name stood out on nearly every page: Lily. My heart thundered as I turned the pages, seeing references to hotels and dinners, along with brief notes like, "Meeting Lily, can't wait." Shock curled in my stomach. This wasn't a benign hobby partner. The evidence of intimacy was scrawled in Tessa's own handwriting. I felt dizzy, as if the walls of our house had begun tilting. Every reassurance she had given me seemed like a cruel distortion. I put the notebook back carefully, my mind reeling with questions. Should I confront her? Should I gather more proof? Most importantly, how could she risk our daughter's happiness for whatever this was? I decided I had to face the truth. Tessa was likely having an affair. The realization weighed on me like a lead blanket. I'd never doubted her loyalty until now, and the finality of that broken trust pierced my chest more deeply than I could have imagined. Still, a small voice whispered that I should give Tessa a chance to explain. That evening, when she came home, I calmly mentioned finding the notebook. She froze, eyes wide with panic. Before I could speak again, she blurted out that it wasn't what it looked like. She said Lily needed help organizing events, that Tessa was just keeping track of schedules. Her explanation made little sense. The mention of hotels and the intimate tone of her notes didn't align with any charity function. I pressed her, feeling my pulse hammer in my ears. Tears welled in her eyes, and she claimed she couldn't bear the monotony at home, that she craved excitement and felt Lily offered it. The heartbreak that swept over me was almost tangible. All those nights of Haley waiting, all those broken promises, were they just collateral damage in this search for fulfillment? I reached for Tessa's hand, trembling, asking if she even considered what this was doing to our daughter. She sobbed, but her words came out tangled in guilt. She didn't know how to stop herself. She swore they hadn't gone too far, yet the look in her eyes suggested otherwise. I spent a sleepless night replaying Tessa's words, wrestling with my own fury and despair. Dawn found me in a haze, unsure if I could salvage our marriage or if I even wanted to. That morning, Tessa insisted she would end all contact with Lily. She wanted to prove she could be the mother and wife she once was. She vowed never to lie to me again. In a burst of desperate optimism, I agreed to give her a chance. For a little while, things improved. Tessa tried attending Haley's cheer practice, clapping loudly from the sidelines, though Haley's reactions remained guarded. We made dinner together, something we hadn't done in months, and Tessa attempted to laugh at my silly jokes. I sensed her efforts were genuine, but a sliver of doubt curled in the back of my mind. Late one evening, I caught her staring at her phone with tears in her eyes. When I asked what was wrong, she claimed she was just tired. I pretended to believe her, yet every time a text arrived, I saw her flinch, as if haunted by something she couldn't fully leave behind. Our fragile normalcy hung by a thread. Everything came crashing down the day of Haley's school talent show. Haley had practiced a piano piece for weeks, excited for both of us to hear her. That afternoon, Tessa received a call and slipped into the bedroom. She emerged minutes later with a distant look, claiming she had an emergency at work, though I knew she didn't work weekends. She promised to return in time for Haley's performance. Haley seemed unconvinced, biting her lip as she asked if Mom would show up. My stomach churned, recalling every disappointment Tessa had inflicted. Yet, I tried to muster hope for Haley's sake. We arrived at the school auditorium, took our seats, and waited. The lights dimmed, and Haley's turn approached. Tessa's seat remained empty. Haley blinked back tears, walked onto the stage, and performed beautifully, her small hands trembling on the keys. She bowed to applause that she could barely acknowledge, eyes scanning the crowd for her missing mother. By the time Tessa finally arrived, Haley's face was pale with hurt. Tessa launched into a flurry of excuses, but Haley turned away, devastated. I could barely speak, fury boiling under my skin. Later that night, after Haley had gone to bed, I confronted Tessa. I demanded she tell me the truth right then and there. Her shoulders sagged, and a resigned weariness dulled her features. She admitted she'd been with Lily. It was no longer a casual friendship. She cared for her. Tessa said she felt alive in ways she hadn't felt in years, that Lily understood her fears and desires. My heart felt like it was splitting down the center. Through clenched teeth, I asked if she remembered the little girl upstairs, the one who needed her mother more than anything. Tears choked her voice as she insisted she wanted to repair the damage, but she didn't know how to walk away from Lily. The more she spoke, the more I realized how deep she had gone. I sat there, silent, as she begged for forgiveness and promised again to cut Lily out of her life. Her pleas sounded hollow. For the first time in our marriage, I wondered if it was already too late, if Tessa's version of fulfillment could ever align with the family we had built. A few days later, I made a decision. I left work early and drove straight to the address I'd seen scribbled in Tessa's notebook. It was a small house in a nicer part of town, with a tidy lawn and flower pots lining the porch. My heart pounded as I parked across the street. Sure enough, Tessa's car was there. I watched from a distance, anger and heartbreak colliding in my chest. After an hour, the front door opened and Tessa stepped out, followed by a woman I assumed must be Lily. They were talking in hushed tones, standing close enough to suggest an intimacy that made my blood run cold. Lily touched Tessa's arm, and Tessa leaned in, her face soft with longing. I nearly left the car then, consumed by rage. But something made me freeze. I saw Tessa pull away, tears in her eyes. She turned abruptly and hurried to her car, leaving Lily standing on the porch. Even from where I sat, I could see Lily's despair etched on her face. The scene wasn't one of carefree lovers, it was riddled with heartbreak and desperation on both sides. I followed Tessa home, arriving a few minutes after she did. She was in the living room, slumped on the couch as though her world had collapsed. When she noticed me, her eyes brimmed with dread. Before she could speak, I told her I'd seen them together. I demanded to know if she wanted to be with Lily more than she wanted our family. Tessa began to sob, trying to form words that wouldn't come. Then she admitted Lily had urged her to leave me, that they could start fresh, but Tessa couldn't bear to abandon Haley. Her voice cracked as she confessed she was torn between a love that felt electric and a life she'd built for nearly a decade. I thought I would explode from the pain of it all. Yet, in a rush of anguished clarity, I told Tessa she needed to choose, fully and finally. She knelt on the floor, crying so hard I thought she might never stop, whispering that she wanted to come back home for good. She said she'd call Lily and end everything. Hearing that should have felt like relief, but all I felt was an overwhelming exhaustion. I wish I could say our story ended with a clean break and immediate healing, but reality is messier. Tessa made that call, and for days afterward, she walked around like a ghost, burdened by guilt and leftover feelings she couldn't simply erase. Haley sensed the tension, though she didn't know the specifics. Whenever Tessa hugged her, Haley would cling back, as if fearful her mother would slip away again. I questioned whether Tessa's devotion was genuine or just a reaction to seeing my anger. I kept expecting another late-night text, another cryptic excuse, but it never came. Instead, Tessa began showing up for Haley's recitals with anxious enthusiasm, baking cookies for the bake sale, and letting her phone stay in the kitchen instead of by her side. Though I remained guarded, I saw flickers of the woman I once knew. The real turning point came on the night of Haley's final piano performance. Tessa sat in the front row, tears rolling down her cheeks as Haley played. Afterward, Tessa enveloped our daughter in a fierce hug. For the first time in months, Haley's smile reached her eyes. I still don't know if I'll ever fully trust Tessa again, or if the ghost of Lily will linger in our marriage. But in that moment, I saw a glimpse of genuine remorse in Tessa, and it reminded me why I fell in love with her in the first place. Sometimes the best we can hope for is a second chance, even when the future remains uncertain.